Hello, my name is Tony Ridley, and once again thank you for joining us in this Crisis Leadership and Management Education tutorials. In this section we're talking about roles and responsibilities of crisis management teams and departments and representative elements. So once again, the caveat being that this is not a physical or proximity based process. It's not something that everyone's sitting around the table. This could be over technological means, email, telephone, video conferencing, VoIP, all those sorts of things. Is the crisis management team could be global, it could be physically located within the same town or city. However, what we're talking about is crisis management as the overall function as it relates to a particular crisis or within the organisation. So everyone needs to remember that this is not a face-to-face physical process. Now, in the roles and responsibilities, we've spoken about the several 6 to 8 ideal functional representatives or councils that constitute the superior premium crisis management teams and collective elements ranging from chief executives, finance, legal and so on. And we've spoken about a number of those prior to this. However, in this particular session, we're going to be focusing on compliance and administration. So once again, every organisation is different. The terminology, the representative elements, whether it be one person, whether it be a departmental process, the specifics of that can vary significantly. However, we're going to address the aspect of compliance and administration, which may have already been part of the roles and responsibility of a finance manager or a legal or HR or some other administrative compliance individual. So the first thing is insurance. Insurances as they relate to every aspect of both the organisation and the circumstances which has triggered the crisis. Providing advice on availability, on agreements, on terms and conditions and exclusions and all those sorts of things. Again, whilst we've spoken about the human aspect with HR having an understanding of that and legal potentially having an understanding, is that the reality is that for many insurance policies, they never end up or have never been reviewed by HR or legal because they were more administrative, or the sheer volume of consideration they've sat somewhere else. They could be a frontline management decision, they could be a country or project decision. So therefore, whoever has an understanding and intimate working knowledge of those insurances as they relate to either the organisation or the crisis and considerations and decision points as a result of the crisis. They should be able to activate specific support procedures, so the logistical administrative tail end. They are the implementer or the authority for implementation. They are the authority for briefing, guidance, possibly even payment or an activation of certain service provisions or service providers, because this can be internal or external, whether there's an internal billing process or an external service provider. Again, they need to be the representative agent that liaises or activates or is authorised to release the particular service that's required, not on a broad spectrum nature, but in consultation and collaboration and agreement with the overall crisis team that determines that's an appropriate course of action. Also, they represent somewhat of an oracle, somewhat of an insight and compliance for the organisation, regulatory systems, their policies, procedures, contractual, and a whole host of written, ethical standards, guidance, business plans, and a whole bunch of other things that reside with either the individuals and or departments that sit in compliance and or administration. Again, working knowledge of as broad and as specific as possible should reflect the individual that sits on this team or in this council. If you have somebody who doesn't have this breadth of knowledge or can't access or doesn't have authority, then you've either got the wrong person, the wrong department, or you need to reevaluate their position within the group, because again, crisis management decision-making processes is often the triage of a significant volume of data, information, and the interpretation of information that is not readily available, but based on the information that you know internally it ultimately ends up shaping your decision-making process. So again, having consultant input and advice from those individuals that have a working understanding is paramount, irrespective of whether this particular role and function is represented by a more general management, senior executive, crisis leader or whatever. Compliance and administration needs to be addressed as a separate, unique discipline. And this comes down to, and certainly reiterates the point when we talk about the last few logistics elements of facilities, transport and accommodation. Regardless of whether the crisis encompasses those particular concerns, at some stage there is going to be, if it is truly a crisis, there is going to be consideration for logistics, whether it be flying management around, whether it be bringing in additional resources or emergency lighting or whatever the circumstances may be, relocating to a business resilience, business continuity disaster site, all these sorts of things that constitute the typical types of crisis. There is going to be logistics involved, whether it's financial in nature, whether it's facilities, whether it's transport, accommodation. There is always finer details. Now, it's simply ineffective to think that the receptionist or an executive assistant or someone, depending on their status or the organisation, some of those more implementation elements can be managed at that level. However, someone with the authority that encompasses the breadth of all of those previous mentioned caveats of compliance, corporate policy, regulatory, client agreements, all those sorts of things need to be encompassed. So that individual or that representative council needs to be able to cover off or be the conduit for all of those decisions. So as you go through the decision-making process, the evaluation, the activation of certain plans and procedures, this council or this authorised individual needs to be both representative and knowledgeable in all of these areas. Now, if you have a team where one or more of these functions is assumed by one individual, then at certain stages there needs to be a forced shift or a forced consideration and objectivity specifically to that discipline. So if, for example, you have a general manager who's both the crisis leader and the head of the crisis management team, who is also representative of the roles and responsibilities as they relate to compliance and administration, there has to be a forced change management. That is, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to look at this problem and consider this problem from an administrative and compliance perspective. And it has to be a Zen-like process or a meditative process to exclusively consider those aspects, because again, the smaller the teams, the more responsibilities, the greater chance there is for exclusion of key elements. And what that means is if your crisis management team constitutes 4 people, and those 4 people are representative of everything from operations to finance to legal, compliance, administration, media, communications, then invariably there's going to be the typical human prioritization of tasks. There will be preferential decision making, there will be bias, and certain things will be forgotten. So it's a forced, regimented system to step back, take that consideration and force for a duration or period of time objectively to focus just on the issues from that perspective. Put your yellow, green, black, white hat, whatever the de Bono systems of thinking, lateral thinking, but focus specifically just on compliance and administration, because irrespective of the essences of crisis management, it's the implementation 9 times out of 10 will fail because the logistics and administration wasn't either clear, available, or applied to the circumstances in a timely fashion. So once again, that completes this section on roles and responsibilities. We've been speaking about compliance and administration. For more information and tutorials and education on crisis leadership management, please visit the website at www.crisismanagement.tony-ridley.com. That's all for now. Thanks very much and bye.